The DFP connector has multiple functions relating to Google DFP involving various methods. For example, create, get, update, select PQL, and more. These can be seen in the documentation found online. This video describes the create functionality. In this use case, we demonstrate a proof of concept that communicates between Salesforce and Google DFP via MuleSoft's Anypoint Studio. From a high level, we perform the functionality of DFP's Create Companies by extracting information from Salesforce and pushing it into DFP. As can be seen, a custom app and custom object have been created in Salesforce so that we can have our own table of companies. This is how you create a new record. You can see here that the company name and company type have been set as required fields, because they cannot work with null data. Here we are creating two dummy companies named Acorn Inc. and Alkaline. You can see the records have been added with the information we just entered. Now we can move to the Anypoint platform and view the process between Salesforce and Google DFP. Here we find the flow that performs the task. The Salesforce connector has been hooked up to the Salesforce account and the credentials have been added. From here, selecting the fields of the records found in the custom table shows the created date and time of these records exceeds a specific timestamp. The data from Salesforce is continuously being checked every 5 seconds, and using a watermark, it gathers all the records created after that predefined timestamp. This will be updated to the current time so as not to collect and store duplicate data. Next, we have this logger. Its main function is to output the company records that need to be processed. Moving on, we find a choice element. This checks the size of the payload. When the payload contains 0 records to process, it logs a message saying that there is nothing to process and it stops until the next polling interval. However, if there is more than 0 records, it calls and runs a subflow. At the start of the subflow, we find a transform message that transforms the information found on the payload to an acceptable format to the DFP. It is important to realize that the output is set as application Java. The rest is quite straightforward, where previously attained fields from the Salesforce connector are set as the values of new variables which represent the name, address, email, and type of the new company to be created. For the non-required fields of the records, we find when a null value is discovered inside the specified fields, we set new variable as an empty string. Finally, we find ourselves at the DFP connector. The DFP is authenticated here, where the required credentials are filled in and the connection is successful. Once the connection has been set up, we can go back and the operation here is set to create, and the service type is set to companies, showing what kind of function needs to run. The information to be passed is the payload shown in the object's reference field. This next transform message sets the returning value and the ID of the newly generated company to the flow variables of IDs created. This is also logged here. Now we run the project to see it working. Here you can see that 2 records need to be processed. These are the IDs of the newly created companies. We can also go back to Salesforce and add more records to show that the poll is working and gathering new records each time one is created. We now switch to the user interface of Google DFP. Here in the Google DFP, we are in the Companies under the Admin tab. We can see the various company records that currently exist along with some brief information. There aren't any of our new companies listed yet. The web page is being refreshed to locate and find these newly created companies. Now we can see that the companies we created earlier in the Salesforce custom table have been stored in the DFP. This proves that the connection between Salesforce and Google DFP has worked correctly via MuleSoft's Anypoint Studio by using the DFP connector.